Monsters flooded the world, plunging it into despair. Humans fought to their last breath to protect the place they called home. And among those brave souls was the protagonist of this story, Caecilian Levandium, who fought fiercely against that calamity without flinching. Many years passed, and he relentlessly threw himself into endless battles, ceaselessly piling up corpses with the only sword he had. And in his heart, there wasn't a shred of fear, no matter how dangerous. Then one day he had to confront his half-brother Aaron. Please remember to subscribe to the channel to support me. The battle was fierce and brutal, but in the end, he managed to take down that bastard. Truly took down that piece of trash. After the bloody battle, the people of Thessalion also fell and entered the realm of death like this. But fate had other plans. His soul drifted in the endless void. He met a human boy from a planet called Earth. The boy's name was Seo Dojin, on the brink of death for reasons unknown. And before dying, he only wanted to make a simple request to Vandian. Vandian didn't even bother to hear what the kid wanted. Anyway, he just wanted to die in peace, having had enough of everything, losing his country to monsters, losing all his loved ones, and finally dying like a dog on the battlefield. The boy Seo Dojin also had no desire to live. All he wished for was for his family to live peacefully. Vandian finally agreed to listen to the kid's request. The boy lit up like a child seeing candy in a store. And then he mustered all his courage to voice his wish. He wanted his family to live in peace. And so, our hero accepted the offer, taking on the responsibility of protecting the boy's family. Waking up on Earth in the body of the teenager Seo Dojin, he had a new mission: to infiltrate the Nam San Gate, classified as C rank for obvious reasons. Only registered heroes were allowed entry. The automatic scanner continuously blared warnings, demanding he scan his hero ID card. Which, of course, he didn't have such a card. He just barged straight through the building. The building was heavily guarded, heading towards the gate. Security forces alerted. Alarms blared loudly, warning of an intruder. Once inside the gate, he started wandering around, trying to find some monsters to vent his frustration on. And then he encountered it. He ran into a hero party, a proper official party. Those with full licenses and permission to be in this gate. They thought he was just one person, a lost individual, and offered to lead him out, especially since they were also preparing to withdraw. Seo Dojin remained silent, radiating a strange aura that even the heroes sensed something was off. His attire was too ordinary, not like a hero at all. Now, porters did dress more casually, but his clothes were strangely too simple. And what was that bag he was carrying? What else could it be, from what they saw? He was probably just a clueless porter abandoned by his party. But then they weren't so sure. Finally, Seo Dojin spoke up, admitting their suspicions were valid, but also clarifying he came alone, not with any party. Hearing this, one of the heroes. The hero sighed, understanding why he was there. He had seen it many times, all those driven mad by the glamorous advertisements about heroes. Thinking life was easy, they recklessly entered gates without following legal procedures. First, one must register and be certified as an official hero, then undergo training and tests. A C-rank gate was no place for rookies to play. If they wanted to start a career, they should find an F-rank gate, unless they wanted to die a pointless death. After listening to him ramble on, and giving unsolicited advice, Seo Dojin coldly replied that he didn't need to hear anything. The entire hero party was stunned by the kid's ice-cold attitude when they were just trying to help. But their leader spoke up, asking his teammates to calm down if the kid didn't want help. Then just leave him be, let him fend for himself. The captain was sure the kid would soon learn a harsh lesson, not to turn a deaf ear when wise people were speaking. They just hoped he would soon realize the harshness of these gates, which were nothing like the TV shows that praised heroes as if they were reincarnated saviors. It was only a matter of time. Seo Dojin, after many dangerous encounters, finally faced a giant troll staring him down, ready to swallow him whole in an instant. The monster lunged, attacking, but missed, its blow hitting nothing but air. This guy moved incredibly fast. The troll didn't even understand what had just happened. Then he clenched his fist. unleashing a terrifying punch, hitting so hard it blew the monster's face off. Just like a scene from One Punch Man or Omni-Man on a rampage. Now that the monster was out of commission, here comes the exciting part, a crucial moment. Can you find any looting opportunities? First, he grabbed the monster's sword, and that bastard then used that very sword to carve deep into the monster's body and pulled out a large glowing stone. It was actually just a low-grade mana stone, worthless to the point Seo Do-jin never bothered with them in his past life. But currently, he was broke. So he had to pick it up for now. Suddenly, another group of monsters arrived, surrounding the area, furious to see their comrade slain. Seo Do-jin turned and threw the gemstone, with terrifying speed, throwing it so fast it blew off the head of one of them. The two remaining idiots charged aggressively as if seeking death. And if they were asking for death, Seo Do-jin couldn't do anything else. Why not send them on their way? So he started wreaking havoc all around again. Scene change, we return to the hero group still, slogging through a dense monster area. Their minds still lingered on the strange encounter with the young man from before. The orange-haired woman seemed genuinely worried about Seo Do-jin, afraid he might have already died. But the captain reassured her that was unlikely. If he was just an unregistered person barging into the gate, agents from the control center would soon detect him. The agents on duty were B rank or higher, and this gate was only C rank. So, unless the kid stupidly charged into monsters, there was no way he could die here. The bald guy agreed. He was sure that arrogant kid was now trembling, waiting to be rescued from this deadly place. But reality was the complete opposite. Our protagonist was him. He was making those large punching bags tremble in fear. One hit to take down prey. He was so fast they couldn't even touch him, let alone slash him with their huge swords. Seo Do-jin appeared right behind one of the idiots in that group and delivered a kick so powerful it crushed its head. He picked up a sword from the pile of corpses and started harvesting, gathering sweet mana stones for himself. A while later he was done, his bag full and ready, planning to withdraw, although honestly, no. He was a bit disappointed with today's hunt. All heavy, low-grade stones not worth much. Just then, one of the agents finally spotted him and called for backup before Seo Do-jin could turn around. Those men in suits were already blocking his way, their eyes full of suspicion. They began to say they were from the gate control center and were taking roll. He would have to go with them to the center to clarify things. Seo Do-jin wasn't sure if he should comply, but he didn't bother to explain, making the atmosphere increasingly tense. That reaction made the man in the suit even more tense. He emphasized that Seo Do-jin needed to cooperate and follow procedures. In response to that, rigidity was only Seo Do-jin's clear look of annoyance, as if all this drama was just ruining his mood. But despite his irritation, Seo Do-jin didn't have the energy to argue. He simply turned and walked away because words were useless. The men in suits started to threaten. If necessary, they would use force. One hothead in the group couldn't be patient any longer. He loudly warned that if Seo Do-jin didn't cooperate, any injuries incurred would be his own responsibility. And if things could be resolved with words, that would still be the best option for everyone. But it seemed Do-jin had lost patience. That man immediately grabbed Seo Do-jin's wrist. And Seo Do-jin coldly warned, "Don't get in my way anymore." The threat was so sharp it made the man in the suit shiver. A cold chill ran down his spine. The other two immediately drew their weapons, enhanced magic batons. These were level 4 magic batons, strong enough to subdue an orc without much effort. Not mere toys, however, to Seo Do-jin. Those batons weren't enough to make him flinch. He twisted the wrist of the man holding the baton, causing him to groan like a weakling. Seo Do-jin coldly issued a final ultimatum. If they didn't want to lose what little dignity, if they had any left, they should get lost immediately. The men in suits were bound by duty and forced to act, trying their best to hit Seo Do-jin with the magic batons, but not a single blow landed. Seo Do-jin retaliated with a crushing blow. That crushing blow straight to the head, causing him to collapse. He turned to deliver a punch to another stomach, then Seo Do-jin's gaze turned to the guy with glasses, the last one standing. This guy knew things were bad. His whole body tensed as if he could be taken down at any moment. Suddenly, Seo Dojin blurred and vanished from sight, completely disappeared. As if vanishing into thin air, the guy with glasses was truly terrified, because he had seen with his own eyes someone disappear right in front of him. And then from nowhere, a sudden punch landed hard on his stomach, making him stagger. Stepping back in pain, it seemed Seo Dojin was starting to get tired of being chased by these agents. He began to seriously consider registering as a hero. The remaining agent quickly reassured him that as long as Seo Dojin wasn't involved in anything illegal or shady, no one would pursue him. Hearing this, Seo Dojin asked about something called RIF. The question left the agent stunned, completely unsure how to answer. The thing called RIF. There were many gates connecting to other worlds filled with bizarre monsters. These gates appeared scattered throughout the world. The gemstones obtained from monster corpses became a new, extremely valuable energy source. Therefore, the government had to control all gates called gates, and only registered heroes were allowed in. Uncontrolled or unsealable gates were called rifts. Back to our subject. He found it annoying that the men in suits were always following him everywhere. Every time he passed through any gate, they accused him of illegal entry. The agent tried to explain that when an unregistered hero entered a gate without permission, the central system would immediately sound an alarm, and agents waiting nearby would be dispatched. Learning that Seo Dojin intended to enter a RIF, he warned that unlike gates, rifts were not so easy to enter. Trespassing into a RIF would be severely punished. No warnings or leniency. But Seo Dojin didn't want to hear any of that. He grabbed the poor agent's face and ignored him, and tossed him aside like a bag of trash. Now, all he could do was regret not reporting to headquarters sooner. Things had gone far beyond his capabilities. Before leaving, Seo Dojin glanced at the pitiful man on the ground, thinking he was truly just a person. Pathetic weakling. That guy seemed to have a broken arm but still managed to shout threats, vowing to catch and throw him in jail. Scene changes to the Gumcheon Complex. Digital Complex in Gumcheon District. This was one of the places. A huge building, now known as the Hero Complex, where all transactions related to magic stones and items from gates took place. Currently, this place was busier than ever. Seo Dojin was approaching one of the shops, specializing in buying and selling magic stones. As soon as he stepped inside, he was greeted by a thick-skinned young man scrolling on his phone, muttering nonsensical words learned from social media, non-stop, as if his mind had been addled by those useless clips. When Seo Dojin said he wanted to sell some mana stones, the cunning shop owner immediately boasted. This shop offered the highest purchase prices in the country. Without much ado, Seo Dojin threw all the low-grade magic stones, still stained with monster blood, onto the counter. Seeing the pile of blood-smeared stones, the shop owner grimaced as if he'd just been stabbed in the back. Disgust, clearly visible on his face. However, he didn't complain and continued the transaction, even offering Seo Dojin coffee while he waited. A moment later, Seo Dojin leisurely sipped his coffee, while the shop owner carefully wiped each stone clean. After finishing, he began to calculate. A total of 12 low-grade mana stones, 16 mana stones, mid-grade, along with a few other high and low-grade ones. After a 40% commission deduction, Seo Dojin would receive about 5,500,000 won. But he was not at all satisfied with this 40% deduction, feeling it was extremely unfair. He clearly wondered. He hunted them himself, killed them himself, collected them himself. So why did this guy think he deserved to take almost half the money? The shop owner arrogantly boasted that he was being generous because other shops took 45% or more. He sarcastically told Seo Dojin that if he didn't like it, he could take his stones back. No place would pay a higher price. Of course, Seo Dojin wasn't naive enough to fall for that. He started to gather his mana stones, preparing to leave. Seeing his dirty trick fail, the shop owner quickly grabbed Seo Dojin's arm, stopping him from leaving. He shouted, demanding payment for appraisal, and for the coffee too. Appraisal fee 30,000 won. 10,000 won for the coffee, not to mention the expensive blood-stained cloth that now had to be thrown away. In total, he owed him about 350,000 won. Seo Do-jin flatly rejected those absurd demands, ignoring the guy making a fuss. Finally, the shop owner. Resorting to threats mentioning the C-rank bodyguards he hired for protection. Just then, 3 large men stepped out from the back, scowling, asking who dared cause trouble here. They declared that if anyone made a scene, they would deal with them immediately. Seo Do-jin just calmly glanced at the shop owner, his gaze as sharp as a knife. The shop owner didn't back down either. Trying to act fearless, he retorted with a fierce glare. Only a moment later, the scene shifted to the sweaty and trembling face of the shop owner, who just moments ago thought himself the center of the universe, but reality had dealt him a harsh blow when Seo Do-jin took down all 3 bodyguards as if swatting flies. Effortlessly, it was clear who the real main character was. Afterwards, Seo Do-jin approached the counter and casually pushed the price down. Do a 1% commission, before the shop owner could react. The deal was sealed at 1%, no strings attached, because when Seo Do-jin looked someone straight in the eye, no one dared to argue. Transaction complete. Seo Do-jin casually left the shop with a thick wad of cash, the fruit of his own blood and sweat. When he got home, both his grandmother and younger sister were stunned by the amount of cash he brought back. His grandmother was suspicious, wondering where he got it. Seo Do-jin quickly made up a story that it was money he had lent to a friend, who then did well in business and repaid him. His grandmother was half convinced, half doubting, unsure if he had any close friends that rich. So he added another layer to his lie. It was a childhood friend. Finally, his grandmother didn't ask further, at least not asking any big questions. Meanwhile, Seo Do-jin's younger sister was happy, extremely proud and joyful that her brother had helped the family become well off. Seo Do-jin patted his sister's head, reassuring her that from now on they would live comfortably. The little girl jumped for joy, her eyes sparkling. Seeing his sister so happy, Seo Do-jin realized a truth. He was gradually fulfilling a promise. It was the last wish of the original owner of this body before he died. He only wished for his grandmother and his younger sister Yoon-young to be safe, to live safely, happily. He disappeared right after without letting Seo Do-jin say a word, and when he woke up, Seo Do-jin had become this Seo Do-jin. Now his only goal was to ensure this small family lived safely, prosperously. To do that, he had to buy immediately. The safest house in Korea currently cost up to 110 billion won. For Seo Do-jin, making money wasn't an issue, as long as he regained his full original strength. This world had many similarities to the country that was destroyed where he used to live. The only difference was the gates, monsters, and threats. Here were much weaker. For someone who once bore the title of Sword God, this world was like a playground, because from the beginning until now, he had only used 1/10 of his power. Suddenly, a knock on the door. The person outside said they wanted to see Seo Do-jin. He stood up, deciding to open the door. When the door opened, in front of him were 2 thuggish-looking gangsters waiting. These guys started shouting to demand the debt that Seo Do-jin was carrying, amounting to 48 million won. As soon as Seo Do-jin saw them, he knew. These were loan sharks. The very ones the real Seo Do-jin, whom the current Seo Do-jin possessed, had borrowed from. Borrowed money before he died. Initially, he only borrowed 5 million won to treat his hospitalized grandmother, yet now they were demanding 48 million won, with exorbitant mafia-style compound interest. They knew Seo Do-jin had recently made a lot of money hunting in gates and intended to make a final score, because everything was documented in the loan agreement. But what those bastards got was a punch like a thunderbolt right in the face of the biggest guy. The punch was so strong it sent him flying, rolling several times on the ground. The other guy stood frozen, mouth agape, eyes wide, unable to believe what he had just seen. At this point, Seo Do-jin turned to look at the remaining one. He reminded him that he had already paid back over 9 million won, both principal and interest. If calculated properly, it was they who owed him the change. And then another punch, this time making the other guy clutch his face, crying like a baby. Seo Do-jin stood tall, his voice deep and threatening. Go. Go tell your boss, I'll come find him myself. Scene changes to a shopping mall. Bustling with people, amidst the crowd appeared the cute image of little Yoon-young. Yun Young was smiling brightly in a teddy bear shop, her eyes sparkling. Seo Do-jin had taken his sister shopping today. He allowed her to choose anything she liked. Don't forget, this guy wasn't always this. It was the memories of the real deceased Seo Do-jin that reawakened emotions that had seemingly dried up within him. Now, every time he saw Yun Young, his heart warmed strangely. Even though she was only his half-sister, he still loved her. Wanted to love her with all his heart, he would make up for all her shortcomings, give her the best of everything. Finally, Yun Young chose a small, cute bunny plush. She was afraid to buy something expensive that would bother her brother. But Seo Do-jin didn't agree with that modesty. He immediately chose a stuffed animal several times larger for his sister. This was her day, and she didn't need to worry about money at all. Afterwards, the two siblings sat in a restaurant, eating delicious food, chatting cheerfully while enjoying their meal. A strange voice called out Seo Do-jin's name. It was a middle-aged woman accompanied by several bodyguards looking like a pretentious, slightly chubby lady. As soon as she opened her mouth, her tone was disdainful, starting to attack Seo Do-jin for his way of dressing. Then she shifted her target to Yun Young, the little girl sitting next to him. Without mincing words, she taunted, "Aren't you just like your mother? Back in the day, begging and not repaying." That sentence was like adding fuel to the fire, Seo Do-jin. Meanwhile, Yun Young still didn't understand who this woman was and why. She approached the little girl and asked directly, "What's your name, child?" "I'm Lee Yun Young," the girl replied politely. Hearing this, the woman suddenly remembered that this was Seo Do-jin's sister, but still didn't forget to mock her simple clothes, calling them sloppy. Not only that, she also insulted their deceased mother. At this point, Seo Do-jin just wanted to rush in and teach her a lesson, but he still tried. Tried to restrain himself, not to be provoked. She herself was surprised by Seo Do-jin, something he definitely would have done before. But then, that woman decided to go further, opening her mouth. She asked a child, "Do you know what the word bad girl means?" That was the last straw. Seo Do-jin shot up, glaring, his voice as cold as ice. "You are truly an ugly woman. You look like you belong to the orc tribe." She was stunned, eyes wide open, mouth agape, speechless. To understand why Seo Do-jin endured this woman, we must go back to the past. Seo Do-jin was born out of wedlock, living in poverty since childhood. Seo Do-jin's mother passed away when he was only 7, and he was sent to live with his biological father. His father later remarried Hong Hee-ju, and things started to get worse. When she gave birth to her own son, Seo Do-jin was completely treated as an outsider. Eventually, he even got kicked out of the house. He had to live with his grandmother and his half-sister Yun Young. Every time he remembered Seo Do-jin, current, couldn't help but feel sorry for the old Seo Do-jin, who tried to live well, always smiling despite enduring so much pain. But now it was different, and that woman was his stepmother's stepdaughter, meaning his stepsister. That's why he had been patient until now. But then, he no longer wanted to be submissive. She's nasty, ugly, and stupid too. He continued to crush her spirit by launching a barrage of harsh words, like dropping bombs. On this girl's insecurities, he said it bluntly, the only reason this girl. "You always call others ugly because you yourself are drowning in complexes and jealousy. You're just an envious person obsessed with yourself. Of others. That's the truth this world should know." As he continued to crush her self-esteem with sharp words, the entire mall turned their eyes on them as if watching a main stage performance. The ugly stepsister, Orosh, started to lose her temper, no longer able to remain calm. But just then, Seo Do-jin's stepmother, Hong Hee-ju, appeared. As soon as she saw her mother, her daughter, with a whining tone like a spoiled child, she began to complain. This kid just used words that made her lose face completely. But the mother just looked at her daughter with cold eyes. Cold, clearly showing disappointment. She quickly silenced her with just a glance. No kidding, folks, Seo Do-jin's stepmother was truly a character not to be trifled with. At first, I thought the stepsister was the stepmother, but no, that glamorous woman was actually Hong Hee-ju. She invited him to come home for a visit. But Seo Dojin wasn't easily fooled. He knew the true face behind her mask. It was this woman who had made him live in hell for 12 years. Bringing back memories Seo Dojin just wanted to bury forever. The past rushed back, putting Seo Dojin into a serious state as if he had just been triggered by PTSD. With all the memories, Seo Dojin had become a man, and had been answered by others. With a tone colder than your mother's scolding, he looked straight at that woman, stepmother Hong Hee-ju, and uttered the cruel words, "Get lost." Being spoken to like that by someone younger, it was truly a slap, straight to that woman's face. She turned, trying to maintain her last shred of dignity as she left. In fact, she didn't expect. The kid who used to just bow his head submissively would now dare to resist. When she was slapped without reason, her insolent daughter trailed behind with a few bodyguards. These bodyguards were truly useless mannequins throughout the scene. Now let's return to the main character. Clearly, those two women had completely ruined his rare moment of peace. So Seo Dojin decided to leave. The way he reacted to his stepfamily was intentional. He wanted to emphasize one thing. The weak Seo Dojin, who didn't dare to speak up in the past, was dead. That trashy family should realize this soon. Scene changes to a Mercedes speeding down the road. Inside the car are Hong Hee-ju and her daughter. The daughter angrily blames her mother for leaving without making Seo Dojin pay. She continued to curse Seo Dojin, bitter about being humiliated in public, but the mother didn't care about her daughter's words. She turned to her manager and questioned why Seo Dojin was still alive. The bald guy was clueless. According to previous reports, he should have been dead, but the woman roared as if mad. How could that happen? They had ensured it was handled cleanly. The manager could only bow his head and promise to check again, and this time ensure. Meanwhile, her daughter didn't understand what was happening. Hearing about murder, she started to panic. Finally, the mother turned to her daughter, asking an unexpected question. "Do you have feelings for that brat?" The question made the girl blush. Flustered, not knowing how to answer. In fact, she was just worried that if Seo Dojin really died, her grandfather or father finding out would cause big trouble. But the mother paid no attention. She grabbed her daughter's mouth so hard it was as if she wanted to suffocate her. She gritted her teeth, saying her daughter was not allowed to get involved in her affairs. That woman had decided. Seo Dojin had to die, no second chances, especially after he dared to stand up and humiliate her in front of everyone. Dealing with him was the best revenge she could think of. A decade ago, the world fell into chaos when rifts appeared. They were a bizarre dimension, birthing terrifying monsters. They poured through gates, killing indiscriminately. Cities were destroyed, engulfed in a sea of fire. But as darkness enveloped, light also appeared. Mighty warriors, heroes stood up. They were the first to discover mana stones from monster corpses. Back to the present, Seo Dojin was moving somewhere. In his mind were thoughts about mana stones, which had completely changed how the world used energy. Because of its value, nations began to fight over rift gates, to exploit resources. Now the entire world's industry depended on rifts, on heroes. Becoming a hero was the only way to participate, to get a stable, sky-high income. Seo Dojin arrived at the headquarters of Yongdongpo Hapsa. The name sounded complicated, but the reason he came here would soon be clear. He entered the building, and at first glance it hit him. All 8 people in here looked like cheap thugs trying to use their appearance to intimidate people. But Seo Dojin remained calm, unfazed. Remember to subscribe to the channel for the latest updates. The boss put out his cigarette. His voice full of sarcasm pointed at Seo Dojin and emphasized his audacity, not only daring to beat up his underlings black and blue, but also daring to casually walk right up to his door. That only proved one thing: Seo Dojin truly didn't care about anyone anymore. But Seo Dojin calmly said that the one truly at a loss here was him. A statement that made the boss almost choke on his cigarette smoke. He frowned, his voice hardening. "What the hell did you just say?" Seo Dojin adjusted his glasses and slowly replied, his voice deep and cold as steel. He came here to demand compensation because for a long time, the clowns of this organization had caused him countless losses, mental, physical, and material. At this point, the boss realized something important, an undeniable change. The boy from before was no longer a gentle, weak person. The person before him now was the one who had crushed his underlings like trash. All signs pointed to a single hypothesis. Seo Dojin had definitely undergone an unparalleled awakening in that hellish gate. Even knowing that, he still pretended to be superior. Mocking Seo Dojin's newfound confidence, he sneered that this very arrogance would lead him to ruin, that he was deluding himself about his own strength. To reinforce. He waved his hand and a few burly men stepped forward surrounding Seo Dojin. They were muscular, with fierce eyes. But to a sword god who had walked through hell, they were no different from insects. The boss continued to spew his trashy reasoning. He said, even an awakened person was just trash on the battlefield, nothing more. The best part was, he even thought Seo Dojin was just an F-rank hero, so weak that his organization could crush him any time. Meanwhile, Seo Dojin just casually sat cross-legged on the sofa. Stared at by 5 men, his face didn't change color. He just coldly ordered, sit down. The words stunned the boss. He couldn't believe it. Seo Dojin maintained his cold expression, then said, I'm not finished talking yet. One of the group lost patience, his temper flared, and he stepped forward to challenge Seo Dojin. He smirked, slowly taking off his glasses, making his opponent even more flustered, and then he unleashed a terrifying Mike Tyson-style punch. The sound of a terrifying punch. The guy flew backward as if hit by a truck. The rest were stunned. But the nightmare wasn't over. Seo Dojin continued to take down another one with just a spinning kick. While teaching them a lesson, he calmly spoke about the dark deals the boss was hiding, under the guise of a loan finance company. Seo Dojin landed a punch on an orange-haired guy, simultaneously exposing their document forgery of theirs. After throwing the punch, he turned to the boss, stating his purpose directly. I need a legitimate hero identity too, to register and earn money. The last guy tried a sneak attack, but Seo Dojin dodged the blow, then returned it threefold. So the whole gang rolled over and went to sleep to Seo Dojin's special lullaby. 100% success rate after lulling them to sleep. Seo Dojin tilted his head. He needed a perfect identity without any flaws. In his record to avoid trouble later. The boss was still in shock. In just a few seconds, the situation had completely reversed. Seo Dojin then reminded, you only have 1 day. A few underlings didn't dare intervene. This was commendable, as in most stories they would. Rush in as if they could defeat a god even if they were just level 1 rookies. The boss started to tremble, looking at Seo Dojin with terrified eyes. Panicked ultimately. What level was his strength? Based on what he witnessed, he guessed at least B rank. He was lost in a jumble of chaotic thoughts to the point that Seo Dojin approached, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. But his eyes were filled with killing intent. He wanted to know if Hong Hee-ju, his stepmother, had ordered him to dispose of him. This had actually been revealed earlier, through her conversation with her daughter and assistant, the boss. Confused, stammered without answering, until Seo Dojin's hand tightened, making him groan in pain. All the underlings could only watch, faces pale, and frankly these guys should change their barber. Finally, the boss. He confessed the woman's wicked plan. She wanted to drain Seo Dojin financially, pushing him into debt and despair, forcing him to commit suicide. To free himself, a truly cruel plan even. For a hated child, no one should do that. Hearing that, Seo Dojin tightened his grip one last time, then let go when he saw the guy crying and begging. He just quietly asked, is that also why? You guys locked me in the gate. The boss hastily denied it, playing the role of an innocent, uninvolved party. He even said that if Seo Dojin died in the gate, he wouldn't get a penny. That was a reasonable reason for him not to act. This explanation made Seo Dojin pondered, muttering the name Kang Chun-woo, the one who had put him in the gate. Seo Dojin demanded all information about that person. Deadline, tomorrow. He left, as politely as he had entered. No more arrogance or oppression. After that conversation, Seo Dojin fell again, into a pensive state deep inside. Seo Dojin, the old one, had only one wish, the sole desire to protect his sister and beloved grandmother. Through layers of pain, it further showed how helpless and desperate he had lived. But now the sword god was ready to handle the situation, to fix this whole rotten order himself. The next day, he was officially registered as a hero and, unsurprisingly, received a B rank, unlike other stories where one must start from F rank for the world. He swiped his card into the scanner. The system confirmed his identity. Proof. Completely valid. However, the machine warned that the mission Seo Dojin was about to undertake exceeded his current rank in danger, which annoyed him. Maybe earlier he should have forced that guy to upgrade his rank to avoid trouble, to get involved in such petty troubles despite the system constantly warning about not entering gates beyond the allowed level. Seo Dojin didn't care at all. He just walked in, regardless of everything. Briefly about the Nightshade Island gate, it was actually just a B-rank gate. But that didn't mean a B-rank hunter could survive entering it. Typically, heroes were recommended to be one rank higher than the gate's rank to ensure safety. However, the scale of this dungeon was rated D, meaning it spread out and would be very difficult to solo. But the advantage was its tunnel-like structure, which made solo hunting somewhat less stressful. However, due to the gate's scale, the dungeon's forces would not be sufficient. The official advice was to have an A-rank hero undertake this mission. But the words danger and risk did not exist in Seo Dojin's dictionary. For him, the worst that could happen was facing a whole horde of monsters crammed into a narrow tunnel with no room to maneuver. Seo Dojin smiled as he faced the horde of monsters. It was a giant serpent surrounded by a chaotic purple aura. For most heroes, this sight would be terrifying. But for Seo Dojin, it was a lucky sign. He started to put on his gloves ready for battle. And what's more, this serpent wasn't alone. It had a whole gang of friends. And their tongues reminded me of scenes from alien monster movies. They charged, attacking with everything they had. But it was completely futile because our Seo Dojin was a true killing machine. A killing machine to the extent that he collected mana stones as if the monsters had never existed. The black-armored viper was a monster species famous for its hyperactive paralyzing toxin. Just one. A small contact was enough to make anyone collapse. Aware of that, Seo Dojin unleashed a full-power punch in an instant. He slashed across the monster's body, blood splattering until its body was cut in half. When the monster was destroyed, Seo Dojin noticed the gloves he had bought for 300,000, except for not letting the poison seep in, a worthy investment. Please remember to subscribe to the channel for more new videos. He proceeded to another area and started blowing their heads off. With his astonishing speed, he pierced straight through their skulls. Blood splattered as the snakes were sent to the afterlife. Seo Dojin stood there smiling, searching for mana by tearing through monster flesh. But disappointingly, there were none. This wasn't too surprising because according to the old world's laws, monsters like these only had a 3% mana stone drop rate, meaning he had to take down hundreds to hope for even one. A bargain. Continuing forward, Seo Dojin discovered a special creature. I'll temporarily call it Mr. Skull Mist. You might think this is the final boss. But Seo Dojin had other thoughts. He asked the giant snake. Asked if it was the boss, as if it would kindly answer, like an old friend. Anyway, Seo Dojin still saw this as a good sign because now he didn't have to. He spun around and immediately lunged into attack, wanting to end the battle quickly to go home. But surprisingly, despite delivering a powerful punch, it did nothing. It just left a tattoo on its head. While he was dangling midair and unable to dodge, the monster swung its tail, whipping Seo Dojin into the cliff face. Seo Dojin lay there after the horrific impact, perhaps partly realizing the truth about this boss's strength. The monster bared its venomous fangs. Hissing like a hungry girlfriend, it lunged to bite him, but it didn't know. Luckily, Seo Dojin managed to dodge, using the momentum of the counterattack. He immediately jumped up to counterattack. A super strong punch landed on the monster's body, creating more cracks on its scales. From the second attack, Seo Do-jin learned something important. This boss's scales were much harder than the black snakes just now. It was a much bigger challenge. The scales were too tough, making it impossible for him to penetrate with a single blow. The tables turned, forcing him to consider changing tactics. In his original state, the sword god would easily crush this monster in an instant. But then, something caught his eye. A warrior's sword. Inside, someone had perished in battle with the boss. And now you'll understand why he's called the sword god, not the fist god. Although the sword was worn from battle, Seo Do-jin still picked it up. He believed, a sword is only strong in the hands of a worthy wielder. With that belief and the sword in hand, he advanced towards the giant snake. The creature tensed, lunging to attack again with terrifying speed. Seo Do-jin responded by soaring into the air, hovering mid-sky, striking a cool pose, and proudly declared that this monster should feel honored to be taken out by him at full power with a sword. Although this sword looked like scrap metal, this guy was truly formidable. With just a few slashes, he unleashed countless, flashing sword strikes that left the snake's body sliced to pieces, not a single part intact. The serious battle ended humorously as the snake died slumped in the background, and Seo Do-jin's sword turned to dust. Luckily, he had finished it off. The monster, while it was still struggling to cling to life. With the boss defeated, Seo Do-jin suddenly had a clever idea that rarely any protagonist thinks of. He pulled out one of the snake's fangs, believing that if properly forged it would become a weapon. He considered it a reward for his journey. And then he could also search. When he emerged, the sky was full of stars. He hadn't realized he'd been in the gate for so long. He only became more determined to restore his own strength to its peak. At the same time, he was secretly glad his old friends didn't witness his current weakened version. Truly embarrassing. After the hunt, he went to an appraisal place to sell the mana stones he had collected. Before him, there was another hero also bringing a load of mana stones for trade, but the stingy employee treated that person like trash and immediately announced the commission would be 40%. Even the naive hero felt something was wrong. He spoke up directly, questioning, and asserted he was just an ordinary person. The employee then resorted to the same old trick as with Seo Do-jin, explaining that the 40% rate was the lowest compared to other appraisers, while the gate center charged 50%, but that didn't include tax. From his perspective, this was a good deal for heroes as they could still earn a decent amount. Finally, the hero was paid, and he made no further complaints, except to ask worriedly about the employee's bruised face. Funnily enough, the guy repeated the old script. Though his face was beaten up, he acted convincingly, saying some psycho had destroyed the guards and left him with such a face. The hero heard this, thought about it, and concluded the fault lay in hiring only low-level guards, because in this world rank wasn't everything. Actual skill was what we needed, was the important factor. Rank was just an artificial system periodically updated for stability, he also pointed out. The difference between those sitting around guarding counters and real heroes risking their lives on the battlefield. Though speaking seriously, the employee just wanted him to shut up and leave as soon as possible. Finally, the hero left, but still said he would help the guy if he needed it. At that moment, Seo Do-jin walked in, brushing past him without a glance. His ice-cold gaze froze the air. Instantly, the employee recognized Seo Do-jin and panikedly pointed, shouting that he was the psycho who caused the mess. He shrieked that it was him who beat him to this state. Turning back, the hero felt rather impressed. His assessing gaze fell on Seo Do-jin. No dialogue. Wreaking havoc here made him suspicious, wondering if he was abusing his power to bully civilians. Though he only knew one side of the story, it still made this character realistic and interesting. The employee was gleefully watching, knowing this person was a veteran hero who had been active for many years and had many connections. If Seo Do-jin did anything to him, he could use those connections to get Seo Do-jin into trouble. But Seo Do-jin didn't care, just turned back, coldly telling the old man to get out of his sight. This made the other person feel provoked, as if he really was a bastard. Seo Do-jin casually asked if he intended to take revenge. Hearing this, the hero seemed annoyed, but with his experience, he knew that fighting another hero was extremely foolish because it almost always led to a fatal outcome. The death rate was even higher than when fighting monsters. Remembering that, he decided not to get involved and turned to leave, leaving the employee, speechless, unable to utter a word. Seo Dojin turned to the appraiser. The sly one asked if there was a problem. Before he could open his mouth, Seo Dojin threw the bag full of magic stones onto the counter. Each one sparkled, all high-grade mana stones, making anyone who looked at them jump. From the employee's perspective, he began to wonder who this guy really was, and it totaled 150 million won. A seemingly large number, but to Seo Dojin, it was too little for a day's work. When he asked for the money, the employee reminded him they still had to deduct 1% commission, making Seo Dojin glare coldly at him, but then remembered their deal. Between them was only a 1% deduction. Seo Dojin calmed down and told him to quickly process this part. Inside the mind of that humorous appraiser, a rage was boiling. He really wanted to give this guy a good beating for his outrageous attitude and unbelievable arrogance, but it all remained in his imagination. In reality, he could do nothing but grit his teeth and endure. At this point, he had to. Say as an excuse, such a large sum required approval from a superior. Without wasting another second, Seo Dojin slammed the table, his voice a low growl. Then call your superior right now. I don't want any delays. Trembling under pressure, the employee hastily picked up the phone, stammering to his boss over the internal line, trying to explain the situation smoothly. But before things could progress, Seo Dojin snatched the phone. "Get out, let me talk to him," and yelled into the receiver, "I don't have all day, pay up immediately." The boss on the other end didn't seem to want to get involved either. He reluctantly agreed, but asked to return the phone to the employee. Seo Dojin flashed a knowing smile, pretending to obediently hand back the phone. But instead of handing it over, he threw the device straight at the wall, shattering it into pieces. Perhaps that was Seo Dojin. It was accidental or entirely intentional. The employee looked at the shattered phone, his whole body trembling. Meanwhile, Seo Dojin didn't care at all, just coldly ordered, "Then get the money ready. Everything's done." And so, countless bags of cash were quickly packed, ready for this massive transaction. In the end, the employee was left, exhausted, battered both physically and mentally. You might feel sorry for him, but remember he was the one who specialized in scamming, taking more than half the money from heroes after they had to. Risk their lives. A true scumbag. 10 minutes later, his boss was at the shop, with an angry face because he couldn't be reached. The funny thing was, as soon as the employee saw his boss, he immediately threw in the towel, submitting his resignation on the spot. The boss looked around, spotting the smashed phone stuck to the wall. Just by looking, he could guess what had happened. Taking out his phone, he quickly dialed a familiar name, Hyunju Yeon. "Come here. Come right away, we need to deal with an out-of-control hero." Hyunju Yeon appeared, a striking young woman, with gorgeous purple-pink hair like a vibrant sunset. Everyone around cheered as they recognized her as the Hyunju Yeon, a celebrity, like a star admired by thousands. And it must be said the outfit she was wearing was truly top tier. She entered the shop with a confident demeanor. Every step drew all eyes. With her mere presence, Hyunju Yeon silenced the entire room. She smiled and greeted the receptionist with surprising politeness. "Hello, I'm here at my uncle's request." And the reason everyone was buzzing was because she was one of the 4 strongest S-rank heroes in the nation. It was rumored she was the boss's niece. And surprisingly, Hyunju Yeon herself confirmed, "Yes, I'm here. At my uncle's request, I heard there was a slightly overzealous hero." Her curiosity piqued, the female hero. Prepared to listen to the whole story, the next scene shifts to our protagonist with his toned physique. Muscles rippling like a statue, he was meditating in the midday sun, sweat dripping from his muscular body. Despite hunting monsters all day, the reward he reaped was insignificant. He began to worry about his future. For now, his biggest goal was to reach a level where he could solo S-rank gates. That meant restoring his full strength. Understood? It was time to step in to train hard. Seo Dojin's biggest challenge in this world was the extremely low mana density. No matter how hard he tried, his current absorption rate might not be enough. It would also take at least 3 years to approach his old strength if everything went smoothly. Another option was to invest in stronger equipment, but unfortunately, even the worst items cost hundreds of millions. Too expensive. Suddenly, a cold chill ran down his spine. He sensed something very dangerous approaching. Looking towards Yun Young, his eyes sharpened. He immediately rushed over, picking her up with lightning speed. "Everyone get inside now," Seo Dojin yelled. Once inside, he slammed the door shut. His grandmother asked frantically, "Watch out!" The ground shook violently. The whole house felt like it was about to collapse. His grandmother trembled. "Oh my God, is it an earthquake?" Yun Young burst into tears in panic, clinging tightly to his hand. But only Seo Dojin understood. This was not an earthquake. Normally, it was a sharp, violent energy flooding the space. A spatial rift, a gate, had appeared right above their roof. Without thinking, he growled, "Everyone stay inside, don't go out." At extreme speed, he rushed straight towards the rift. The last sound he heard before stepping in was his grandmother and sister calling his name. In desperation, scene changes to the Hero Association headquarters. A warning signal blared. A spatial gate had unexpectedly appeared in the sky. This was the first gate opening after 63 peaceful days. The White Lion team was the closest. The manager immediately ordered, "Contact them, mobilize nearby heroes for rescue immediately." But when he looked closely at the exact coordinates of this gate, his eyes darkened. Oh God! This gate appeared right on the roof of a residential house. This was an extremely difficult situation, even for experienced individuals, because if a civilian accidentally stepped into the rift, they would almost certainly die. Not to mention the rift would immediately close, not opening again, not allowing anyone else to enter. And if the person inside died, 10 days later, a fierce wave of monsters would erupt, spreading throughout the area. That would cause chaos, destroy everything, plunging the surrounding land into disaster. And Seoul's safety would be completely threatened. The manager was extremely curious about who had entered the rift. Then they quickly confirmed it was Seo Dojin, who had acted, the resident of that house. According to his grandmother, Seo Dojin had decided to enter the rift just to protect his family. With this information, they determined he was not a professional hero. This made the situation, because an ordinary person had almost no chance of returning from the rift. All staff felt desperate and helpless, because they could do nothing more for the situation. In the next scene, we see Seo Dojin's stepmother, Hong Hee-ju, angry. It drove her mad to hear news of his awakening. She couldn't believe it. And her assistant reported that although Seo Dojin hadn't officially registered with the Hero Association, it was confirmed that he was indeed the one who awakened during the recent gate opening. This infuriated her because Kang Chun-woo had clearly been assigned to finish off Seo Dojin, but ended up making the target stronger. In her rage, she slammed her hand on the table, screaming why they couldn't finish the job themselves, yet still received money for a failed mission. She roared at the manager, then immediately sent a threatening message to Kang Chun-woo that if he didn't personally kill Seo Dojin, he would have to compensate 10 times the amount received. But what surprised her even more was her assistant revealing new information. They had just discovered a new rift appearing right on Seo Dojin's roof. It was verified that Seo Dojin had entered, and that meant he wouldn't be able to survive and return. Hong Hee-ju appeared overjoyed at the news and satisfied with the possibility of Seo Dojin dying inside. For the first time, she calmed down, appearing strangely composed. Then she told her assistant to continue monitoring the situation until more information was available. As for our boy, he had just set foot inside the rift. It was a forest, truly. It was the forest where he had spent peaceful days as a child, Patiswa Forest. And it was recreated exactly as in his memory, down to the smallest detail. All the dense mana also felt familiar as before, quietly walking on the trail. Seo Dojin smiled as he saw the majestic world tree appear before him, the source of mana. The purest, standing with a divine beauty, the most sacred structure, and the thing that maintained balance for the entire world. When the old world collapsed, everything began when the world tree was burned, causing the mana flow to be forever distorted. Yet in this dimension within the rift, the tree remained intact as if time had never touched it, although not yet. But he knew one thing for sure. He had a chance to regain his lost mana. Breathing the sacred air, that wonderful mana flow Seo Dojin felt. His strength becoming increasingly clear. He meditated for over 3 days straight, forgetting to eat, drink, or even his bodily needs. A full 10 days passed. The only thing he focused on was regulating his breath in harmony with nature. But on the 10th night, trouble found him and broke his tranquility. Strange creatures with bizarre shapes, they could all be found. Called Bokina, they appeared with the purpose of burning the world tree, repeating the tragedy of the past. But this time, Seo Dojin would not let that happen. The frenzied creatures rushed to attack him, while Seo Dojin silently regretted not having a sword, or any weapon that could make things easier. The monsters blazed with fire. Roaring, they charged towards him. But by now, Seo Dojin had recovered completely, and with mana surging through his body, he no longer needed weapons, because he himself had become a weapon, the ultimate weapon, and those hands possessed unparalleled power, reached out, ready to confront. With power emanating from the pure mana flow, he struck down one monster with a single touch, the second one, stunned by the terrifying power it had just witnessed. Now let's explain what just happened. The attack he just unleashed, called mana release, not exactly telekinesis, but a kind of energy burst in the form of a destructive blow. It had been a long time since he used this ability, because all this time the mana in his body had been always at an extremely low level. However, the Bulkinga creatures still hadn't stopped. They immediately counterattacked by firing energy beams. Vibrating laser beams glowing like pulses shot straight towards our teenager. But this time he looked calm. More than ever, his face as still as a calm lake, the immense mana surrounding his body enough to block any damage that could be caused. From that attack, his every step brought him closer to the monsters, his whole body blazing as if fueled by his spirit. He had protected the world tree from danger, and now he wanted to relax a bit, enjoy the fruits of his long training. Those ugly monsters once again tried to fire energy to counterattack, but the teenager was lightning fast, immediately grabbing 2 of them. With absolute strength, he forced their mouths shut, locking them so they couldn't release energy. Thus, the energy in their mouths couldn't escape and exploded violently inside. In an instant, their heads exploded, leaving charred, headless corpses. The corpses. Giant figures slowly shriveled as if decayed by the power of sacred fire on the ground. Scorched, 2 rare mana stones rolled out from their bodies. However, that was only 2 of the many monsters he had to destroy. Seo Dojin. His heart thrilled as he felt the new power called the Eternal Flame. With a satisfied smile, he wielded his weapon as if dancing, amidst a sea of blood, slashing through the monster horde and collecting countless mana stones. The slaughter, one-sided, continued until all the monsters were completely wiped out by him. This time, Seo Dojin truly hit the jackpot. Besides countless mana stones, he also found a small coin or perhaps a seed emitting a sparkling golden light. Ladies and gentlemen, please remember to subscribe to the channel for more new videos. That was the special item called the Eternal Flame. When he picked it up, he felt a warm energy spread in his palm. With this item, he regained control over another part of the power he once lost. He crushed the chip, causing the mystical flame within to pour out. The way he playfully handled the Eternal Flame, as if playing, immediately reminded one of Sukuna, Jujutsu Kaisen. Under normal conditions, the most logical strategy was to continue absorbing mana from the world tree, but his current body had reached its physical limit in mana absorption. So the second option was to absorb the flame. Upon absorption, his body immediately transformed completely. Mana converted into fire element. An intense fire burned in every cell. The fierce fire energy radiating from him caused the ground beneath his feet to crack. In his previous life, he didn't feel the need to absorb this, not even bothering with the Eternal Flame. But now, absorbing the flame was a must if he wanted to reach the ultimate realm. Each full absorption of such a flame took at least 10 minutes to complete. Luckily, he had collected quite a few, so the goal was to absorb as much as possible. The appearance of the rift quickly attracted the attention of the public and media. Hordes of reporters and journalists surrounded his house, while agents and association staff were strictly guarding the area. Seong-ho was extremely angry because someone had dared to enter the rift arbitrarily. Looking closely, he looked like a copy of Yeon-ho from Wolfcard, but with neater hair. There was also Kim Hyun-woo, the character, with blue hair, who sympathized with Seo Do-jin's actions to save his sister. However, Seong-ho didn't believe that reason, thinking Seo Do-jin was just greedy and reckless, risking his life to enter the rift without considering the consequences. According to Seong-ho, if Seo Do-jin died normally, it would be fine. But if he died in the rift, that place would become an explosion point for monsters to pour out, and that would be the real disaster. Yoon Ju-yeon asked for Dilma's opinion, the head of the association, and the answer was to act according to the established procedures. Yoon Ju-yeon continued to question the phenomenon of rifts appearing densely everywhere, like in the US, China, Switzerland, Turkey, and even the UK. That's why the association was having difficulty controlling numerous rifts globally. However, some countries had controlled the situation very easily, making the situation in Korea more frustrating. People here were outraged that because of one person, the whole country could face disaster. Seong-ho, furious, wanted to rush in and beat that person up and pray to God that the rift would swallow him whole. Speaking of the giant purple gate, 28 days had passed since it first appeared, which was also the number of days Seo Do-jin had been in that rift, causing the Hero Association to fear and classify this threat as Level 1. The true identity of Seo Do-jin had not yet been disclosed to protect his privacy, currently only known by an alias. While most of the world still didn't know who he was, Hwang Chang-soo, the loan shark boss, quickly pieced together information and realized the truth. Even his close assistant Kim Yeon-gu confirmed the report to clarify information about his involvement. Kim Yeon-gu currently served as chairman Hwang Chang-soo's right-hand man. Chang-soo appeared, intrigued and wanted to know Seo Do-jin's chances of survival. Would he still be intact when he came out? Yes, I know this sentence. This sentence sounds a bit familiar, like a ritual on the One Piece channel is real. But back to the issue. The assistant believed an ordinary person had less than 1% chance of survival in that situation. But calling Seo Do-jin an ordinary person made Hwang Chang-soo unable to hold back his amused laughter. That very ordinary person had sent his underlings to the hospital, bandaged up for weeks. From the world's perspective, they had underestimated the true capabilities of a civilian daring to enter a rift. Now, Hwang Chang-soo also began to wonder about the survival probability of an awakened individual if put in a similar situation. And to answer that, what was his assistant's opinion? The assistant believed the key factor depended on the hero's true level. No accurate judgment could be made without complete information. Even the SOP, Standard Operating Procedure, acknowledged that combat ability and survival ability were two completely different things. When inside a rift, everything became much more complicated. But one thing was certain, that bastard hadn't changed at all. Hwang Chang-soo wanted to protect Seo Do-jin's family, but not for noble reasons. He was truly a scumbag, planning to sell Seo Do-jin's relatives' organs if he didn't return. And even if Seo Do-jin survived, he would still dump all the debt on him. He was truly the embodiment of a blood-sucking leech. The scene shifts to the majestic image of the World Tree. Here, Seo Do-jin was entering a phase of frantic training, his body now filled with fire mana. He didn't know how much time had passed, but continued to train by absorbing. With the current massive amount of fire mana, Seo Do-jin could freely use and control it at will. His fire resistance also increased as a natural consequence, comparing his current self to himself. In the past, Seo Do-jin believed that, at least in terms of defense, he had taken a step further and was gradually mastering it. He hugged the world tree for a moment, because the tree always appeared to help him whenever needed, both in the past and present. Seo Dojin felt extremely grateful for everything the tree had done for him. As for the pile of mana stones collected, he had skillfully woven vines into a small bag to hold them. Having carefully collected and stored those stones, Seo Dojin understood clearly that he might never see that sacred world tree again, but deep down he still hoped one day their paths would cross, and if the divine tree was in danger, he would definitely be ready to protect it. I don't know about you, but I'm truly moved. That night, Seo Dojin finally stepped out of the rift. Completely intact, luckily he didn't sense anyone's presence nearby. Perhaps most people assumed he was dead, and were waiting for a wave of monsters to pour out at any moment. However, he detected the presence of a strong individual nearby. Without hesitation, Seo Dojin immediately rushed to find the source. Soon after, he encountered two agents, one looking extremely annoyed, the other calm, who were Hyun Ju-yeon and Seong-ho, the two who had appeared before. Just by looking at their uniforms, Seo Dojin immediately understood they belonged to the association, and that meant if caught, things would be very troublesome. To handle the situation, Seo Dojin conjured a fireball and launched it powerfully into the air. A powerful throw, the attack flew over the building, and exploded with a loud bang that shook the entire area. As soon as they heard the sound of destruction, both Hyun Ju-yeon and Seong-ho immediately became highly alert. Realizing it was a fire, they quickly pursued the flames. Arriving at the scene, they witnessed many people standing frozen in fear, frantically asking, "What the hell is going on here?" Meanwhile, Seo Dojin was secretly impressed with the product's accuracy, and thought that it would become a huge advantage for him later, remembering his friend. He wondered if the mage Tusky would be impressed with his current skill level. After all, Tusky was once known as the living fire mage, the strongest mage on the continent, and they once had a deep relationship. Suddenly, Hyun Ju-yeon's sharp senses signaled something unusual was happening. The rift seemed to be transforming right before their eyes, and then it completely vanished into mist. Both agents immediately rushed to the scene to investigate, but when they arrived, they couldn't believe their eyes. The connection between the rift and their world had completely disappeared. Meanwhile, Seo Dojin quietly left for his next destination without any hindrance. The next day, news spread everywhere about the rift that had existed for a month in the Mapo area. According to the announcement, the rift disappeared after 20 minutes, from when Seo Dojin entered. This proved that the Hero Association's concerns about a monster wave were completely justified. Currently, they still had no clues about the sudden disappearance of the rift and were investigating. They also encountered difficulties in dealing with the cause of the fire that occurred near the time the rift disappeared at a garbage dump. This led most people to believe that Seo Dojin was dead, and everything that happened was just a consequence, caused by his own reckless actions. Unbeknownst to anyone, he was hiding in the crowd, quietly observing the conflicting opinions of the public. Some sympathized with the boy who had lost his life, but for our protagonist, the disappearance of the rift was good news, because now he could no longer interact with the World Tree. Even though he could no longer protect the World Tree, there was still one unique thing in this life that he could protect. And that's why we returned to the HCS headquarters. Inside the building, those idiots were gloating, celebrating Seo Dojin's death. They confidently thought they could easily eliminate Seo Dojin's grandmother and sister afterwards, because Hwang Chang-soo was known for always finding ways to strangle others to death. One bastard even brazenly suggested letting the younger sister grow up a bit more, to then use her for other things, while excitedly talking without any control over their words. A familiar voice rang out, cutting through the atmosphere, and asked to see the leader. The scene paused there, then shifted to Hwang Chang-soo, walking and humming in a good mood. He was satisfied, thinking Seo Dojin was truly out of the game forever. His assistant reviewed the day's appointments. Most of today was quite free, only a meeting with another CEO at noon. Hearing this, he was delighted because tonight, he could party hard at a nightclub managed by Madame Kang. Typical of his meaningless pleasures. But everything changed as soon as he entered the office. and started climbing the stairs. Before him was the sight of his underlings being thrown around like toys. Blood splattered everywhere, and the one causing this scene was none other than Seo Do-jin, whom he thought was dead. He grabbed him, slammed him to the ground, and ordered the filthy Huang Chang-su. "Crawl over here." He coldly made him crawl like a real dog. The command made the company head tremble in fear, his breath becoming ragged. He stepped up like a true leader, sitting down in the chair that belonged to Huang Chang-su, completely in control of the situation. Once again, he repeated the command to Huang Chang-su, who was stunned, unable to process the humiliation, no way out. He began to crawl like a real dog. Seo Do-jin cruelly ordered further. "Bark, you only deserve to be a guard dog." The command was issued clearly and coldly, causing Huang Chang-su to whimper in humiliation. It took him a few seconds before. But Seo Do-jin was still not satisfied. He made him bark repeatedly for everyone to hear. Yes, he was forced to bark repeatedly under the contemptuous and disgusted gazes of others. The one who once sat at the highest position was now dragged down to a level lower than human. Just like how he used to treat others, Seo Do-jin coldly pointed out that scum like Huang Chang-su only pretended to be loyal, then would betray at the first opportunity. Stating his name clearly, Seo Do-jin bluntly declared that in his life he had met countless vile people like this. In desperation, Huang Chang-su knelt, begging for his life and promising to be loyal as a dog if spared. But Seo Do-jin was tired of cheap pleas. He responded with a thunderous slap. Just that one blow was enough to make Huang Chang-su lose his balance, coughing up blood on the spot. His assistant, Kim Ian-gu, could only watch the entire event without daring to intervene, until his name was called. Seo Do-jin called him the new leader of the company, advising him to stay away from someone like Huang Chang-su. If he didn't want to be betrayed, then coldly ordered him to kill Huang Chang-su, with full authority handed to him. But that task was too heavy for someone who only knew how to bow and obey. He panickedly refused and apologized, explaining that Huang Chang-su had many powerful connections, so if he died, many troubles would arise. On behalf of Huang Chang-su, he begged Seo Do-jin to spare his life one last time. But Seo Do-jin didn't want to waste words. He suggested rolling his body into a barrel and throwing it into the deep sea, just like they usually did, because clearly his men didn't dare to obey, so he would have to use another method. Seo Do-jin threatened all of them that if they didn't obey, he would throw them all into a monster gate as food. Hearing that, Huang Chang-su completely collapsed. He couldn't bear it anymore and just begged, in tears, promising to forever obey Seo Do-jin. At this point, our hero also had to hesitate a bit. Although he could kill Huang Chang-su right here and end all problems, he realized he had changed in this life. Seo Do-jin himself admitted he had become softer compared to the person. Cruel from before, so this time he chose to forgive, extending his hand for one last chance. I'm sure from today Huang Chang-su would become the #1 devotee, day and night praying to never anger Seo Do-jin again. He shook Seo Do-jin's hand, vowing unconditional service from now on, but then something unusual happened. Why was his hand burning as if consumed by fire? Yes, Seo Do-jin had become softer, but the brutality remained. Looking straight into his eyes, Seo Do-jin reminded him that this was his last chance. Of his. Seo Do-jin then decisively tore off the guy's arm in a clean, unhesitating manner. That arm was burned to the point of being just a mangled pile of charred flesh. When the meeting ended, he coldly turned and left, ignoring the chairman's agonized screams. However, Seo Do-jin still left. A final warning. If anyone dared to touch his family again, he would personally send each one to hell. Their duty was to protect his family for life. That was how to punish them. Officially, the name Seo Do-jin was just a small blip in history. But in reality, he was casually eating in a diner nearby. The government, the Hero Association, and the entire media quickly regarded him as yesterday's news. Everyone assumed the civilian who entered that rift was dead. Even if he came out and declared he was still alive, it's doubtful anyone would believe him. Moreover, revealing himself after single-handedly infiltrating a rift would only bring trouble and Unnecessary fatigue. The good dog Huang Chang-su was currently helping him find a more suitable house. Thanks to that, Seo Do-jin could leisurely enjoy some peaceful time and finally had the chance to treat his sister to a delicious fast food meal. He also told her about the plan to move to a better residential area, making her overjoyed. Now, Yoon-young would get to go to kindergarten like other children her age and prepare to enter elementary school next year. However, when the topic of schooling was mentioned, her mood suddenly became gloomy. Seo Do-jin immediately felt uneasy. He could kill monsters without batting an eye, but comforting children was a completely different matter. He was stunned when his little sister timidly confessed that other children often teased her for being an orphan. Hearing that pitiful plight made the heart of a hero once stained with battlefield blood like Seo Do-jin ache. If his sister didn't want to interact with those mean-mouthed kids, that was fine. They would eventually pay for it. Learning she no longer had to go to kindergarten to be bullied, Yoon-young was so excited that, in his heart, Seo Do-jin had already started planning to send his sister to a prestigious private school, where no one could bully her. That night, Seo Do-jin discovered that Kim Yeon-gu had secretly taken his grandmother and sister to stay temporarily at a cheap inn while he was still trapped in the rift. The bespectacled man almost stammered, explaining that this inn was under company management and thus safety was guaranteed. But Seo Do-jin at this point didn't have the strength to argue with useless lackeys. Instead, he quietly entered the room and finally reunited with his beloved grandmother. Yoon-young immediately rushed to hug her brother tightly like an adorable little bear, while her grandmother trembled, grasping his hand, only able to thank God that her grandson had returned alive. Initially, the once stoic warrior just stood there stunned. But now, when feeling the warmth of family around him, he smiled and fully embraced that love. Little Yoon-young seemed to really like the fast food restaurant, so the three of them often ate there. Today she started to get curious about her brother's job as a hero. When asked if she liked her brother being a hero, she innocently replied, no, even though being a hero was cool and strong. But they also always faced danger, had to fight terrifying monsters, and sometimes even lost their lives. And for her, the most important thing was just her brother. Being able to live beside her and her grandmother for a long, long time. For someone so accustomed to killing, like Seo Do-jin, having someone worry about his safety was entirely new. In the harsh world before, he was the last human survivor, facing terrifying creatures beyond imagination. And in the process, he had lost everyone. But now, given a second chance in another world, something incredibly precious was by his side. Emotions that seemed long lost were gradually returning. Perhaps in this world, he would live happily. Perhaps he would be able to enjoy a peaceful life filled with joy and kinship. While daydreaming a bit about the future, at that very moment, the Korean Hero Association was in serious turmoil. Hwang Tae-soo, founder of the Korean Hero Association and director of the World Hero Federation, was extremely worried about the Rift event. Recently, or rather its non-existence. They had sent their best people to the scene to investigate, but found no new clues. The complete obscurity about the situation frustrated him immensely, as no one could guarantee that a suddenly disappearing rift wouldn't unexpectedly reappear. His assistant also expressed agreement, believing that if a monster wave occurred, at least they wouldn't have to wait, with unknown variables like the current situation. But director Hwang Tae-soo immediately cut her off to avoid angering him further. Though worried about the unknowns, he still felt lucky that at least no one had been injured. Hwang Tae-soo was one of the 100 strongest and most respected heroes in the world. His reputation far exceeded statistics or political polls. He was an icon that even a new president would find hard to match in terms of historical influence. For him, the main concern was the safety of the people. In other words, he was truly righteous. Even if it took more time, he still requested a thorough investigation around the area. Fortunately, the surrounding residents had agreed to sell their houses to the association, so there were no obstacles. As compensation, Hwang Tae-soo's side even wanted to pay a higher price than the market to compensate for the inconvenience they had caused the residents. According to information from many reliable sources, many rifts had appeared simultaneously in other countries. Clearly, something extremely unusual was happening. Meanwhile, the United States and China had entered the rift control phase, but among the major powers, the United Kingdom was facing the biggest trouble. While experienced heroes had been dispatched to handle other rifts, the UK team was truly nothing more than a pile of garbage. After a month of effort to eradicate the rift in the UK, the campaign officially collapsed in an embarrassing failure, and the monster wave from the UK rift had officially begun. Even so, the city's residents continued their daily lives as usual, seemingly unaware of the approaching nightmare. Amidst the bustling crowd, Seo Do-jin walked like an ordinary person, blending into the crowd unnoticed. Today his destination was his favorite shop, in the Hero Complex. As Seo Do-jin pushed open the door, the guy at the counter, instinctively scanning products, greeted him, but immediately. Upon seeing Seo Do-jin's face, every hair on his body stood on end in fear when facing the black-haired young man. Luckily, the manager was also present in the store today, so he wouldn't have to face the ruthless customer alone. The manager quickly folded the newspaper he was reading and looked up straight at Seo Do-jin. His voice, though calm, couldn't hide his annoyance, because this was the guy who had forced the cashier to buy a pile of low-grade magic crystals at an exorbitant price. Seo Do-jin lazily took off his backpack and threw the whole bag onto the floor. Actually, it was good that the manager was present today. That way, the transaction for this pile of crystals would proceed more quickly. The manager silently thought, another batch of trash crystals. He had no interest in such petty business. However, Seo Do-jin didn't like being refused when. All he wanted was a fair exchange for the manager. For any sane businessman, a 1% fee was truly not worth accepting. It was best if this kid just left, but Seo Do-jin asserted, if they refused to deal with him then, it would be a mistake the manager would definitely regret later. However, the manager continued to shoo Seo Do-jin away, not even bothering to glance at him. This was the final warning before things got out of control. In response, Seo Do-jin casually kicked the backpack towards him, causing everything inside to spill out onto the floor. Both the counter staff and the manager immediately recognized the unusual characteristics of the pile of crystals. It turned out that shabby bag contained hero crystals, a legendary treasure that money couldn't buy. Seo Do-jin might not be an expert, but he knew this stuff was extremely expensive. This was top-tier high-grade stuff. In fact, hero crystals, a notorious drug lord in Mexico named Guzman, used them in the production line of a new generation of drugs. A lab accident changed his entire life, and also made the world reevaluate the worth of this small stone. Thanks to hero crystals, Guzman awakened. Since then, this type of crystal became an invaluable treasure for awakening abilities and enhancing mana, a source of energy. So much rare energy could only be classified as an absolute premium product. Like a heavy blow, Seo Do-jin ordered them to pack the goods themselves and then turned to leave. The manager immediately changed his contemptuous and arrogant attitude to one of reverence, even personally, escorting him to the VIP seating area, while also offering refreshments as the counter staff carefully wiped each crystal. Seo Do-jin really liked this feeling. The tables turned in an instant, 1 second being chased away, the next sipping cool drinks. And his first request was full payment, taking only a 0.5% fee. As soon as he saw the manager hesitate, Seo Do-jin immediately threatened to cancel the deal. In previous transactions, Seo Do-jin had agreed to a 1% fee, but this time it was even lower. Actually, it was simply because he was annoyed. In response, the manager bowed as low as possible, trying to offer the most sincere apology of his life. But Seo Do-jin was tired of empty apologies. They could accept his fee or he would leave immediately. Simple as that. At the counter, the cashier silently cursed Seo Do-jin as a rude and arrogant bastard, knowing his act couldn't sway the kid to share. The manager then seriously launched into a lengthy presentation about the crystal market and pricing factors. But Seo Do-jin didn't bother listening to that rambling. He finished his drink and stood up to leave, panicking the manager. Feeling the golden deal slipping away, he offered a 9% fee but for no reason. So he continued to haggle down to 8%. The haggling dragged on, 8, then 7, 6, then 5%. At this rate, the store wouldn't make any profit at all. While the manager was sinking in, despair, Seo Do-jin unexpectedly agreed to a 1% fee. It was out of consideration for previous transactions. In his heart, the manager just wanted to scream and curse that blatant blackmailer. But he couldn't let that merchandise go. And then, the next words Seo Do-jin uttered almost made the manager wet his pants with joy. Besides the valuable bag of magic crystals he brought today, Seo Do-jin actually still had about 7 more bags stored away. At this point, the contract was immediately brought out and quickly signed by both parties without hesitation. Only after a few minutes of confirmation procedures, the sum, a total of 67 billion won, immediately flowed into Seo Do-jin's bank account, equivalent to about 48 million US dollars. With his current earning speed, the 110 billion won house he was aiming for seemed no longer too far-fetched. However, the biggest problem was collecting more high-grade magic crystals through unused gates. It really consumed a lot of time. If he could find a way to move freely in rift zones, he could easily hunt for treasure. Just then, while engrossed in his phone screen, an emergency notification was suddenly sent to all citizens nationwide. Finally, the government announced news of a monster wave outbreak in the southern region of the United Kingdom, and simultaneously issued a ban on all travel to the United Kingdom. Upon reading news about a serious real-world problem, Seo Do-jin immediately lost all interest in teasing the shop manager. Previously, regardless of the country or association managing it, he might have personally jumped in to seal the rift. But now he was no longer the same person as before, because currently there were more important things to pursue and preserve. Tonight, Seo Do-jin would treat his whole family to a lavish meal, and the main course would be expensive premium meat. Seeing the marbling of pork and beef sizzling on the grill, premium cuts of meat along with countless tempting side dishes were continuously brought out by staff and placed on the table non-stop. Worried about the expensive prices on the menu, his grandmother then quietly asked her grandson if spending like this was okay, because 250,000 won for 100 g of meat was no small sum. Seo Do-jin immediately dispelled that worry, because after the extremely successful crystal harvest just now, they could eat as much as they liked without affecting the huge balance in his account. The very first bite touched Yoon Young's tongue, and she fell in love with the fragrant, rich, and mesmerizing taste of the beef. Most luxurious. Seo Do-jin continued to place more meat on the grill, while his grandmother just watched silently. In a state of half-worry, half-joy, fresh, raw ribs, sirloin, short ribs, and even pork belly were about to be brought out. Everything was truly beyond imagination. At this point, it was really crazy. How could 3 people, actually only 2.5, eat all that food? But his grandmother had underestimated a protagonist's appetite. To make his grandmother temporarily forget her worries, little Eun Young sweetly encouraged her grandmother to try one piece of that expensive meat. Unable to refuse the cute invitation from her granddaughter, her grandmother finally relented, and just one small bite was enough for all her worries to instantly vanish as if they never existed. After that, the whole family enjoyed a lavish dinner, filled with laughter and happiness spreading around the table. Unbeknownst to anyone, an incredibly attractive woman had just entered the restaurant, attracting everyone's eyes from the first moment. All the guests. Others seemed about to break their necks turning to look every time she passed by. That woman walked straight to Seo Do-jin and didn't hesitate to call him by name, simply wanting to talk for a bit. However, before she could state her reason, Seo Do-jin had coldly cut her off, showing displeasure at being disturbed during a family meal, asking her to come back. When the meal ended, Yeon Ju-yeon took out her business card, hoping that when he knew her name, his attitude would change somewhat. But contrary to expectations, Seo Do-jin completely ignored her and continued grilling and eating, as if she didn't exist. And so, the famous S-rank hunter had to swallow her pride and patiently wait in the restaurant's waiting room. With a star as bright as her sitting in a space for ordinary people, of course, all eyes were drawn to her. Men and women alike couldn't stop glancing. Hyun Ju Yeon was not only fourth in the national S-rank hero rankings. S-rank nationally, she was also rated as one of the 10 most beautiful female heroes in the world. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Who on earth was making Hyun Ju Yeon wait like this? Ignoring the surrounding whispers, Hyun Ju Yeon silently recalled their brief encounter, because according to what she knew, Seo Do-jin had only just entered. After surviving his return, he was currently suspected of being an awakened one, although previously he was thought to have died in the Mapo Rift event. Yet now, he was calmly eating dinner with his family, alive and well before her eyes. Besides the inconsistencies surrounding him, just one sharp glance from this young man was enough to make an S-rank hunter like Hyun Ju Yeon also wary. How could a newly awakened person reach S-rank in less than 2 months? Even the oil tycoon Guzman, despite pouring money like water into mana stones, took 5 months to climb to the top. So Hyun Ju Yeon began to deduce that Seo Do-jin must possess some unannounced special ability. Finally, when Seo Do-jin, his grandmother, and little Un-young were full and extremely relaxed, they started to get up, preparing to leave the restaurant. Near the exit, Hyun Ju Yeon quickly stepped forward to find an opportunity to talk to the mysterious young man. But before she could speak, another group unexpectedly appeared in the restaurant with an arrogant demeanor, overwhelming the atmosphere. Seo Do-jin's eyes immediately turned colder than ever when he saw the man who just walked in. That well-dressed bastard Kang Chun-woo had no idea he'd meet Seo Do-jin alive after that deadly trip into a dangerous space gate. The madman Kang Chun-woo. In fact, he found the truth quite interesting about Seo Do-jin's cockroach-like resilience. Even Hyun Ju Yeon immediately recognized the troublemaker with just a glance. The atmosphere in the restaurant suddenly became tense. Extremely. Enveloped by heavy silence and wary eyes from all sides. But Seo Do-jin chose to ignore the words, the superficial provocations and taunts of that bastard. And then he coldly called Hyun Ju Yeon closer. Kang Chun-woo was truly stunned to witness an S-class hero chatting intimately with someone else. Seo Do-jin gently asked her to look after his family for a moment. Just for a little while would be enough. The only thing she needed to do was hail a taxi so they could leave and return home safely. It would be convenient. Much more so if his relatives weren't present while he collected this debt. Fortunately, Hyun Ju Yeon was a very understanding and considerate young woman. She did as Seo Do-jin asked, reassuring the old woman and the little girl that everything would be fine, then waved goodbye, though their eyes still showed clear worry. Hyun Ju Yeon could only stand silently, watching the taxi gradually disappear in embarrassment as soon as the car started rolling, and left the restaurant at a fairly quick pace. A loud and clear sound of a resounding slap suddenly echoed, vibrating the entire space in the restaurant. When his loved ones were no longer there, Seo Do-jin finally could also shed his dignified appearance and give that bastard Kang Chun-woo a slap to remember. His movement was so fast that Kang Chun-woo only knew his cheek suddenly burned from the unexpected blow. Humiliated by such a shameful blow, Kang Chun-woo gritted his teeth in anger and lunged to counterattack. A panicked waiter tried to rush in, afraid that if 2 awakened ones fought, the restaurant would collapse. But that reasonable advice was met with a completely unreasonable action, and brutal. Fortunately, the waitress wasn't seriously injured, just a bit dazed from the strong push. Seo Do-jin at this moment still maintained his composure, requesting all customers and staff to leave for safety, because Kang Chun-woo was very easily angered. All muscle and no brains, couldn't think of a single coherent curse. And so he was punished with another blow. This time he was completely unprepared, couldn't avoid it, only felt a cold knuckle strike his heart hard. Kang Chun-woo was the one who locked the original Seo Do-jin in a gate, leaving him to die slowly. Though he wasn't the one who directly did it, Seo Do-jin still harbored immense hatred for this bastard, and today he wanted to clear things up. Kang Chun-woo had a face with a goblin-like grimace, Kang Chun-woo smirked and brought up the story of Seo Do-jin's wicked step-aunt, Hong Hee-ju, orchestrating everything. Realizing it was easier than expected to get information from this idiot, Seo Do-jin pulled out his phone. He clicked the video recording app and pressed record without hesitation. Just needed to get a clear recording of the confession. Life afterwards would be much smoother. Once again, Kang Chun-woo was offended by his indifferent attitude. He gritted his teeth, channeling strength into his clenched fist. He cursed Seo Do-jin's mother as a whore, then charged in with all his fury. He was determined to finish the job. He wanted to kill Seo Do-jin right here. But unfortunately for him, those crude attacks were completely useless against Seo Do-jin's superior skills, who had parried, and it was as if the punch had hit an invisible shield. His fist was mercilessly repelled. Kang Chun-woo had never faced anything like this because he had always used brute force to crush everything, but this time it seemed his opponent was someone far beyond the limits of his tiny brain's perception. In his head, suddenly he was pushed backward, his whole body staggering as if swept away. Seo Do-jin watched that movement like a hunter toying with weak prey, and the sound of impacts echoed hauntingly throughout the restaurant. Meanwhile, the terrified waitress tried to dial the police, but before she called the police, before she could press the call button, a small, gentle hand lightly pulled the phone from her grasp. With a bright smile, Hyun Ju-yeon reassured her that she would handle everything. No need for police intervention. The waitress could only let out a sigh of relief. Upon seeing a pleasant face amidst the chaos, slaps, scratches, and a barrage of blows rained down on Kang Chun-woo, giving him no chance to catch his breath. As far as Hyun Ju-yeon knew, this Kang Chun-woo was B-rank hero, and at that level few could make him get beaten. Looking at that beating, perhaps Seo Do-jin should be ranked A. But even so, this fight was too one-sided. As the situation got out of control, Hyun Ju-yeon gently asked Seo Do-jin to stop for a moment. She was just worried that, if the beating continued, Kang Chun-woo might die. Heeding her words, Seo Do-jin dropped the pitiful Kang Chun-woo's limp body to the floor and calmly wiped his hands, seeing that there seemed to be a relationship between them. A deep-seated grudge, Hyun Ju-yeon then asked Seo Do-jin what he knew about Kang Chun-woo, though she didn't grasp the whole story. But Seo Do-jin knew enough to get revenge on that scumbag. Hyun Ju-yeon warned that the scumbag Kang Chun-woo was related to Kang Young-pyo, an S-rank hero. Anyway, Seo Do-jin had known that fact from the beginning, and he saw no problem with it. Hyun Ju-yeon had never met anyone so reckless and crazy. This guy didn't seem to care about the consequences of angering an S-ranker. Hyun Ju-yeon explained that Kang Young-pyo was very protective of his notorious cousin. This restaurant incident would surely reach that monster's ears, and then blood would be shed. Seo Do-jin laughed at Hyun Ju-yeon's worries because he was the last person on Earth to be afraid of S-rank heroes. What annoyed him more was that Hyun Ju-yeon now knew too much about his life. Kang Chun-woo has been dealt with. Now can I go home? Seo Do-jin's resentment shifted entirely to that nosy S-ranker. Face to face, that wild young man looked at the girl without any fear. Hyun Ju-yeon wasn't the type to be easily bullied. She wouldn't back down just because of a threatening look like that. Changing the subject, she apologized for her abrupt arrival and gently stated the reason for her visit, simply because her uncle asked her to come talk after learning about the bag of magic crystals Seo Do-jin had sold. Her uncle expressed a strong desire to buy all the remaining ones. She was willing to pay any price to buy them all. Seo Do-jin warned that those items weren't cheap because he still had many valuable treasures stored, but she just smiled, asserting that the assets of a veteran S-rank hero were beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Anyway, Seo Do-jin didn't object, just that before the transaction he had a small condition. For someone like Hyun Ju-yeon, it probably wouldn't be difficult. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, the sound of expensive wine bottles shattering echoed through the room. Seo Do-jin's wicked stepmother, Hong Hee-ju, was going insane. Having just received the shocking news that her husband's supposedly dead stepson was alive and well, her underlings had insisted the kid died in the rift, and yet news of his survival was spreading everywhere. It was hard to blame the bald assistant because even the hero association had once confirmed Seo Do-jin was dead, but the stepmother didn't want to hear any excuses. She wanted action, and it got worse when news of Kang Chun-woo being defeated by Seo Do-jin was also reported. At this point, Seo Do-jin definitely knew who was really behind the assassination attempt. Hearing about the possibility of being implicated, the stepmother turned pale with fear. Not that she was afraid of Seo Do-jin, but rather the trouble that would come if her father or husband discovered those shady dealings. Everything could be hidden, but if exposed, she ordered her underlings to control the media immediately. If it leaked, both T Group and VK Group would cut all contracts and advertisements. Most importantly, the police had to be bought off. In this regard, her team had also implemented comprehensive response measures. Seeing her henchmen still had some capability made her somewhat less worried, but Director Lee whispered a warning that no matter how much they covered up, this was not a fundamental solution to the problem. By the way, that bald director had a plan that could end this headache by exploiting his connection with someone. Kang Chun-woo's relative. That was the notorious Kang Young-pyo. Even the stepmother knew about this S-ranker. Kang Chun-woo, though considered trash in the hero world, everyone knew how close he was to his powerful cousin. In fact, Chun-woo was just a pawn carrying out all of Kang Young-pyo's dirty work. Both were abnormal. If Kang Chun-woo was arrested by the police or exposed by the media, S-ranker Kang Young-pyo's reputation would also suffer. Indeed, Kang Young-pyo had already taken steps to manage the crisis. The stepmother immediately made a decision. She had to meet Kang Young-pyo as soon as possible. That dog Hwang Chang-soo from HCS Capital had openly sided with the opposition. He was even protecting Seo Do-jin's family. Therefore, she wanted a prosecutor on the phone line immediately. Anyone who betrayed her would pay dearly. The next morning, a group of heroes entered one of the 37 rift zones in Korean territory. Among them, only 5 were being turned into safe gates. The rest could only be exploited according to the Hero Association's schedule. Today, it was Hyun Ju-yeon herself leading a group into a rift with her S-rank ID. She had almost unrestricted access to all gates. Amidst 8 heroes with all sorts of flashy equipment, a young man stood out in an old hoodie. Hyun Ju-yeon had chosen Ranker Inju's Crayon Guild as a temporary group for this trip. Being able to join an S-ranker was an extremely rare occurrence, making the whole group excited. Hyun Ju-yeon gave a simple reason that she just wanted to move. A bit for fun, but the truth was she had to arrange this whole thing herself. All just to pave the way for that young man, Seo Do-jin, to legally enter the restricted rift zone. Seo Do-jin had agreed to sell all his remaining magic crystals to Hyun Ju-yeon at market price, as long as she allowed him into high-level rift zones to earn more. It was true that rifts were full of treasures, but entering such a dangerous place just for profit without any fear was truly insane. It didn't matter to her. All she needed were those magic crystals. After a few minutes walking through a dark tunnel, the group finally emerged into a forest vibrant with light. Unable to restrain her curiosity, Inju started to press Hyun Ju-yeon about the young man's true identity, who had been following the group from the beginning. Ju-jung just vaguely replied that it was someone she knew, but no one believed that superficial answer. Inju guessed he was Queen Hyun Ju-yeon's boyfriend. Annoyed by the constant questioning, she finally revealed part of the truth. The young man was here because she owed him a favor. Anyway, it wasn't every day an S-ranker owed someone. While the group was busy chatting, no one noticed the unusual signs gradually appearing in the sky. A huge black shadow suddenly obscured the sunlight, making everyone look up. High above, a giant creature bearing the form of a monstrous bird was circling, seemingly about to attack. As an A-rank guild, the Crayon Guild team and the heroes immediately deployed a response, drawing their weapons and quickly getting into combat formation. The first encounter was with the legendary terrifying monster Cocytus. With the experience of a veteran raider, Hyun Ju-yeon quickly took command and gave concise orders. Inju, Ju-jung, Seo Hong-ho, defend! Aim for its legs first, she shouted clearly. But before she could assign further, a figure flashed past like lightning. leaving everyone behind. With a decisive leap, that person closed the distance between himself and the flying monster. Seo Dojin completely ignored the group plan, deciding to single-handedly confront the monstrous bird head-on. The entire Crayon Guild and the heroes were stunned, mouths agape watching the scene. They had never seen anyone act so recklessly and boldly. Gathering power in his fist, Seo Dojin prepared to launch his opening blow with all his strength. Meanwhile, Guild leader Inju could only sigh bitterly at their bad luck. They had just entered the gate and already encountered such a troublesome enemy. While everyone was still busy organizing their formation, Seo Dojin casually threw his backpack to the ground. He had accelerated like a bullet, soaring into the air like a whirlwind, a jumping kick, to completely neutralize the Cocytus' flight advantage in the sky. Seo Dojin seemed to master the entire battlefield, energy blazing around him. That monstrous bird was not fast enough to react, let alone defend. As a result, it took the full force of the punch right to its beak. The monster fell heavily to the ground, while the human still hovered among the clouds, truly a poetically reversed scene. Seo Dojin landed lightly right in front of the group. There wasn't a single drop of sweat on his forehead, while the Cocytus was dying, about to breathe its last. The fist mark was still clearly visible on the monster's cheek as a testament to its power. Undeniable. Even the carry on the other side was stunned. Of theirs was also speechless. They witnessed the brutality firsthand shortly after. Seo Dojin. He slowly lifted his foot, then began to stomp hard on the monster's head. Each stomp until it was just a bloody pulp. Many might find it too brutal, but killing a Cocytus truly required terrifying force. The sound of breaking bones and splattering blood sent shivers down the team's spines. Inju now really wanted to know who he was. Even Hyunju Yeon couldn't answer. Certainly, she only knew Seo Dojin was an extremely strong human. And actually, calling him strong was an understatement. Very few heroes in the world could do what he just did. Killing Cocytus with a single punch wasn't something anyone could do. Seo Hong-ho, however, tried to downplay that feat by mentioning his older sister, who was also among the list of outstanding heroes. Nevertheless, Inju and Jujung still couldn't shake off their shock. Before her was a true hidden master. Hyunju Yeon had watched the entire fight without daring to blink. She memorized the young man's decisiveness and terrifying strength, a sense of fear rising within her. She turned to Inju and made a surprising change. For now, I'll go deeper in here with Seo Dojin. Everyone else stay on the outer edge. Hyunju Yeon approached the young man, who was currently dissecting the Cocytus corpse. Before she could speak, he spoke first. I don't share loot with those who don't contribute. Fortunately, Hyunju Yeon wasn't the type to covet a few magic crystal fragments. She just wanted to propose going deeper into the gate, to a more difficult place. A place worthy of his true strength. With a smile, Seo Dojin nodded in agreement, excitement evident on his face. Hyunju Yeon was very familiar with the paths in this gate. She would lead the way, and Seo Dojin just needed to follow closely behind. Without warning, she suddenly dashed off, her speed so fast that the wind shrieked with a sharp crack. Seo Dojin watched her figure disappear over the horizon. Then he also slung his backpack on, getting ready to dash across, while maintaining a dizzying speed without any effort. Hyunju Yeon continuously turned, her head back to check her flanks to see if Seo Dojin was keeping up. But when she saw no sign, she started to feel somewhat relieved and thought perhaps she had overdone it a bit in the initial chase, so she intended to slow down. However, just then, Seo Dojin unexpectedly appeared beside her and asked in a gentle voice, "Can we run a little faster?" The question completely broke Hyunju Yeon's concentration, causing her to almost trip in shock. This was the first time she had experienced this feeling, because usually no one could keep up with her speed in a race. She was in the top 2 fastest in the country, but with the current situation, that ranking probably needed an update. A few seconds later, Seo Dojin unexpectedly stopped midway, just to tease her that she was slower than he thought, even though she had clearly run at full speed to show off. While Hyunju Yeon was panting from exhaustion, Seo Dojin turned his gaze towards the horizon, where a majestic sight was unfolding. Before them was a giant mountain range, reaching up to the blue clouds. And when Hyun Ju-yeon asked what was hidden inside that mountain range, Seo Do-jin's expression immediately became more serious than ever. He said that place was the lair of the boss monster of this territory, the beast named Kasserian. According to him, Kasserian was a giant monster over 20 meters tall, shaped like an ancient dragon-wyvern hybrid, to the point that even Hyun Ju-yeon wouldn't dare think of confronting it. To deal with this monster, usually at least 3 S-rank heroes specializing in combat would be needed to have a chance of survival. However, there was one thing Seo Do-jin knew for sure. Kasserian had a chance to drop an imaginary grade mana stone, a treasure second only to the highest level in the magic system, and for that reward, he wouldn't let it slip through his fingers. Of course, Yoon Ju-yeon completely opposed this reckless plan, but Seo Do-jin said bluntly, with or without her, he would still fight that dragon. Yoon Ju-yeon could only silently watch him dash off at terrifying speed, heading straight for the Rocky Mountain to conquer it. Though she knew it was crazy, she felt as if she had no choice but to follow him into that madness. Something very dangerous and dark was waiting for both of them in the lair of the boss monster. Seo Do-jin's sky-high confidence in daring to face a monster capable of troubling 3 S-rank heroes truly shocked Hyun Ju-yeon to her core. But what shocked her even more was when they arrived. Kasserian was already dead at her feet. The fight had ended at some point, and she didn't even know what had happened. Seo Do-jin casually pulled his knife from the monster's corpse, leaving Hyun Ju-yeon completely speechless. Hyun Ju-yeon's astonishment clearly reflected what she was thinking, because the monster he had just defeated was not the kind that could be beaten so easily. She recalled, starting with a famous hero named Heo, who had built his reputation by hunting monsters like Kasserian. He was also an S-rank hero. The first time Heo confronted Kasserian, he even had to bring 30 A-rank heroes for support. Yet despite such caution, all those A-rank heroes were wiped out, only Heo survived, in critical condition. Afterwards, he decided to take revenge with a rematch. This time, he brought another S-rank hero and 100 A-rank heroes with him, almost forming mini-army. That battle was extremely fierce and bloody. They focused on destroying the wings of the monster to prevent it from flying. And then Kasserian was overwhelmed by a barrage of relentless attacks from the heroes. That sight made people think of the famous debate between 100 men and a gorilla. If I had to bet, I'd choose the human side. And indeed, in that battle, Kasserian was finally defeated. Even so, only a few heroes survived. The rest were mercilessly slaughtered by the monster. The damage they suffered that day was so great that Heo's Sweet Life Guild still hadn't recovered. After 3 years, and yet someone who looked like nothing, special like Seo Do-jin, defeated the same monster so easily, leaving Hyun Ju-yeon utterly confused. Despite being provoked by him, she wouldn't get any gemstones if she just stood. Fighting air, Hyun Ju-yeon could only be astonished at the absurdity of the person standing before her. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she would never have believed this crazy outcome. The terrifying Kasserian monster had been defeated and eradicated by a single blow from one man's hand. As for Seo Do-jin, he had succeeded in collecting the beautiful mana stone from the dragon's corpse. He admired it for a moment, then said he no longer needed a guide from here on out. He could take care of himself. He also refused to take other items from the dragon's body like claws or fangs, showing complete disinterest. He turned his back, flatly refusing Hyun Ju-yeon's offer, leaving her stunned, speechless, stunned, as if she had been rooted to the spot for life. Conversely, Seo Do-jin just wanted to focus all his mind on collecting mana stones from monsters, even generously allowing her to keep all the remaining items as a reward. Hyun Ju-yeon stared at the dragon's corpse, then finally concluded she didn't need to take anything from that corpse. It was getting dark, the group. The rest couldn't believe their eyes. They were speechless seeing one person collect 3 full bags of magic stones, a sight even for those possessing a rank abilities wouldn't dare to dream of. If their guild were to collect that many materials, It would take at least 20 hours. And with such high quality, it's likely more than 3 days wouldn't be enough. They began to wonder who on earth was this person. They all looked at Hyunju Yeon, who had brought him here in the first place. And she herself looked just as clueless as anyone. Even A-rank guild leader Inju couldn't understand how Seo Do-jin could defeat Kassirian without any equipment. This feat alone was enough to place him at the top of Korea's hero rankings. No one could. Truly a person born different, even. He might be the strongest in the world at his current level. Speaking of that person, Seo Do-jin looked exhausted and was returning, with more bags on him. In just one day of monster hunting, he had collected so much, the group began to feel no one would believe them if they told this story outside. Seo Do-jin's superhuman strength was the complete definition of absurdity, and so they were asked to absolutely not breathe a word about what happened today. Finally, they had to accept it. The beautiful S-rank girl approached Seo Do-jin and started chatting about various things. Looking from afar, they looked like nothing less than a couple flirting, at least in the eyes of their teammates. It seemed everyone was trying to convince themselves this was the start of a new couple. The group even thought that in this world, probably only Seo Do-jin was worthy of standing beside Hyunju Yeon, especially considering the strength of both monsters. But the funny thing was, A-rank guild leader Inju quickly realized these two weren't the perfect couple she once imagined. On the contrary, looking at their faces, they seemed to be arguing. She couldn't believe someone dared to shout. Please subscribe to the channel to support me. As for the backpacks Seo Do-jin collected, Hyunju Yeon herself carried them. It turned out, Seo Do-jin was afraid that if the outside world knew he had slain Kassirian, he would become an overnight sensation. That was something he didn't want. So he pushed all responsibility onto Hyunju Yeon. Hearing that decision, both Inju and Ju-jung were speechless, unable to utter a word. But ironically, the rule of truth being revealed sooner or later became reality once again, and Hyunju Yeon, though unstated, had begun to develop a curiosity to learn more about this strange young man. The girl was moved. The scene shifts to another location, where we learn more about another famous S-ranker. That S-ranker's name was Hyo. He was furiously punching a sandbag, as if transformed into a wild beast. His assistant standing beside him was also stunned by the intensity of the training. It seemed Hyo was harboring an uncontrollable rage. He was the guild master of the Sweet Life Guild. His assistant gently advised him to conserve his strength, as a little patience would help him go further in the current difficult times. Even Hyo agreed with that advice. He believed those who looked down on him would sooner or later taste failure. Someday, everyone would have to look up to him as the strongest guild master. The assistant continued to mention the string of victories, and Hyo's feat of killing Kassirian, which set him completely apart from the rest. She even asserted that Hyo's name would be recorded in history as the hero who defeated Kassirian with the smallest team. But the funny thing was, that title would never be surpassed unless Stephen Hawking rose from the grave and performed a miracle. The guild master shared that excitement with his assistant, continuing to boast about his achievements. However, their guild had been suffering heavy losses for 3 years. No longer as it once was, yet the only thing that made Hyo smile was knowing that he was currently the one capable of defeating Kassirian, a reality acknowledged by his own attendant. While discussing high-ranking heroes, the scene shifts to Kang Young-pyo's office. At this moment, he was reading a report about Seo Do-jin's eventful night with Kang Chun-woo and how he had destroyed his cousin. Although Kang Chun-woo originally intended to trap Seo Do-jin forever in the Space Gate, a twist occurred, leading to an awakening. And the person behind Seo Do-jin's assassination attempt was none other than CEO Hong Hee-ju, one of the richest people in Korea. In Kang Young-pyo's eyes, it was hard to understand why she would target such an individual, until he discovered that Seo Do-jin was her husband's illegitimate son, even though he was welcomed into the family at age 5-7. But when her own child was born, he was immediately kicked out of the house. This made Kang Young-pyo laugh because he realized that even Being wealthy didn't save one from being kicked out. Speaking of the payment for the assassination, he knew they were being paid 3 billion. Specifically 3 billion won. 1 billion won for such a mission, a sum too small in his eyes. But what was worse was that Kang Chun-woo, after the battle with Seo Do-jin, was now on the brink of death, his body covered in burns and injuries. He even completely lost his sight and became permanently disabled. This only highlighted the extent of Seo Do-jin's ruthlessness, to the point that even Kang Young-pyo had to admit it. However, Kang Young-pyo seemed amused when he said, "If it were me, I would have chopped," then smashed his skull on our first meeting. At first, everyone might have thought he was saner than his cousin, but now it was clear he was even crazier. When mentioning where the battle took place, they also mentioned that Hyun Ju-yeon was present and was believed to have helped Seo Do-jin in some way. This surprised Kang Young-pyo quite a bit, so he requested more information. He still didn't understand what made Seo Do-jin so special. It was baffling. Unfortunately, even his close assistant knew nothing specific about the secret meeting between those two, because the case file had been silently closed long ago. "Get the hell out of here," Kang Young-pyo threw things, roaring in anger, ordering him to investigate the relationship between the two at all costs, suspecting they had reached some secret agreement. The assistant was completely devastated by that violent reaction, hastily running off to investigate immediately without delay. Kang Young-pyo went berserk, smashing things around, his anger erupting uncontrollably. In his anger, still lucid enough to know that Hong Hee-ju's people would sooner or later find him to make him finish the job his useless cousin had left undone. However, thinking about it, he also felt relieved to be paid, because Hong Hee-ju was an extremely wealthy woman, her fortune comparable to Andrew Tate, so taking money from her was too easy for a greedy person like him. And now we return to our boy, who had just come home after a chaotic and dangerous raid. After today's experience, he truly felt lucky to have chosen to enter the rift instead of the large gate for professional hunters. But things weren't simple, because now he might have to maintain a long-term relationship with Hyun Ju-yeon to ensure he wouldn't be noticed. Recalling their conversation, she had bluntly said many would be suspicious and wonder about the identity of the man who defeated Kassarian, and if that identity was revealed, the consequences would be severe. So for now, her plan was to store all the loot. And if one day he wanted to become famous, she would be ready to reveal the whole truth to the world. In response, he threw the bag of items at her, telling her to keep all those valuable things. That also meant he needed to find another method to enter rift zones, without depending on Hyun Ju-yeon, as that would cause trouble. Anyway, tonight he would have a good sleep soundly in the luxurious house Hwang Chang-soo had specially arranged for him. However, as soon as he reached the door, he immediately noticed the presence of many pairs of shoes clearly indicated uninvited guests were in the house. He entered. The sight before him was a group of men in neat suits standing solemnly in the living room. They were talking to his relatives, as if this were a formal meeting, not a surprise intrusion. The leader of the group looked like a gloomier version of Nanami from Jujutsu Kaisen, and his gaze on Seo Do-jin was as sharp as a hawk eyeing prey. Seo Yoon-young ran out from inside, joyfully hugging her brother, while Seo Do-jin was still completely confused, not understanding what was happening. The guy immediately introduced himself in a clear voice. "I am Prosecutor Park Chae-young," then quickly pointed out the connection between Seo Do-jin and Hwang Chang-soo. Due to his close relationship with Hwang Chang-soo, Seo Do-jin was immediately ordered to be arrested urgently on charges of participating in a loan-sharking organization run by the corrupt CEO of HCS Capital, Hwang Chang-soo.